All right, now we're going to be moving on to a program from the state of Arizona. It's called Getting Ready, Keeping Communities Safe. And we have the director of the Department of Corrections, Dora I want to make sure I pronounce this, Shiro? Shiro, all right. And Christina Duran, Corrections Officer from the Department of Corrections. Interesting to have two women representing the Department of Corrections. All right.
Afternoon. 2.1 million adult inmates are locked up in the U.S.
The microphone is not coming in.
Are locked up in the U.S., and someday most of them will get out. What kinds of neighbors will they be when they go home? Getting Ready is all day, every day, pragmatic pre-release preparation. It transforms corrections, readies inmates for release, and keeps our community safe. Getting Ready improves prison operations and impacts correctional outcomes, extending our reach beyond reducing recidivism, the conventional measure of our success. In our system, inmates practice in prison being the kinds of neighbors that our nation wants them to be when they're released, civil and productive. Getting Ready fundamentally changes how inmates do time. We operate our prisons like your world as much as we can, with similar rules, responsibilities, and rewards. In our system, the work week and leisure time are progressions of everyday opportunities for inmates to choose and change their conduct and improve their conditions of confinement, starting day one of their sentence. Getting Ready doesn't need enabling legislation or new funds to be replicated. Its premise is common sense, cuts across party lines, unites officers and offenders, and resonates with crime victims and inmates' family. Here to share with you how Getting Ready is keeping her community safe is my colleague, Christina Duran.
I'm Officer Duran. I work at the state's biggest prison, and I serve on the executive committee of AZC-POA, the state's largest labor organization representing corrections. Until a couple of years ago, I thought there were just two kinds of inmates, those who complied and those who didn't, and one type of administration.
Those who do what?
Unapproachable. It's different now. Inmates know that they need a GED to get into jobs training or good-paying jobs, so they're off their bunks, they're out of the beds, and they're in school. They work hard for good evaluations to get raises and better benefits. We don't enforce prison rules that aren't in effect anywhere else, and we don't wake them up or tell them how much is on their books anymore. They're in drug treatment during the day and AA at night. Today, there are fewer fights, grievances, and dirty UAs on my yard, and a whole lot of good mornings, so many I can't keep up with them. Even before the earned incentives were in full swing, virtually every inmate was working on their corrections plan in anticipation. And after Miss Arizona talked to them about being a sexual assault survivor, they wanted to do more, give more. That's when fundraisers for crime victims and other agencies really took off. I talk to staff all the time. It's like this everywhere. A couple of months ago, Lonnie Terrell walked up to me. He was the kind of inmate who was always in the middle of anything going down, always with something to say. As he approached me, I wondered what his angle was, because Terrell always had an angle. When he said, "Miss Duran, I'm in phase 3, I stopped dead in my tracks." "No, you're not. You're always in trouble." He was grinning ear to ear, nodding his head up and down. He had changed, and for the better. Right then and there, standing by that tower, I realized I had changed too.
Thanks, Christina. Today, we have far more inmates and only a few new beds and less money, and we're safer and doing better. Institutional violence is down. There are 1/3 less assaults on inmates and 1/2 less inmate assaults on staff. Problem solving is improved. Inmates are filing far fewer lawsuits, and officers are staying. Vacancies and turnover aren't problems anymore. More inmates are ready for release. 3/4 of the population are GED graduates and completed bona fide jobs training. 4/5 are working every day. Inmates are doing a lot more than time. They've donated $1.4 million of their wages to victims' organizations and increased restitution payments. And yes, the community is getting safer. About 1,500 low-custody inmates who completed Getting Ready have been released over the past 2 years. This group is doing much better than comparable inmates. 35% fewer new crimes and 5% less revocations is a 26,000 bed day savings, representing about $1.6 million for Arizona taxpayers. And as more of these inmates go home and remain in the community, savings and safety will increase. That's why an Arizona business partner is about to promote Getting Ready as a preferred workforce development strategy, and our crime victim network is urging its adoption by other states. That's also why AZCPOA endorses our innovation as an effective officer safety program. Getting Ready empowers correctional professionals everywhere, like Christina Duran, to work with the 2.1 million inmates like Lonnie Terrell, to get ready and to go home, our civil and productive neighbors. Thanks for this opportunity to tell our story.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Carl.
Could you explain when you said 35% fewer crimes compared to comparable inmates? What are you referring to? Are you referring to other states? Are you referring to other previous years? What's the comparable?
Yeah. Thank you. We are moving as many inmates through this as quickly as we can, so we don't have a traditional control group. But what we have done as we've implemented this department-wide over the last 4+ years is to compare inmates whose risk scores that look at about 20 different static and dynamic characteristics in comparison to other inmates in our system who have not gone through the program yet and been released. And so that's our comparison group. We're also have retained a specialist who is going to continue to help us to advance in our analysis.
Isn't there wouldn't there naturally be an expectation that those who did go through the program or volunteered for the program would be, even without the program, more likely to do better than those who decided not to participate in the program?
Actually, what our research is showing is that the impact of what we're doing and how we're doing it is amplifying its results. Their productivity in the program day is substantially enhanced in comparison who hadn't been exposed to the environment, and that the environment and the program in combination is not only making our facilities safer, but is having this longer-lasting desired result out in the community. And so we're getting a double positive benefit.
David Osborne.
What % of the inmates participate in the Getting Ready program?
Well, at the time that we submitted our application, all inmates were involved to some extent. We have a 5-year rollout, and so at this point, all inmates except many who are in the highest custody maximum security are participating. It's our intent that it goes department-wide to all custody levels.
Okay, I'm trying to understand the recidivism rates, because you've got data in here. You say 1,588 inmates who participated in full in Getting Ready, and the recidivism rate there is very, very low. It's terrific. But your overall recidivism rate, according to the site visitor, has gone down by 2.7%, which is good, but not huge, nothing like this. So I'm trying to understand if the one set of data is about a subset, how much, how big is that subset of your population?
Well, the study that I think you're referencing looks at two comparisons. One is comparing inmates who have been through the program in comparison to all other inmates who had not. The data that I'm representing in my remarks is looking at the whole of the population who had been through the entire endeavor in comparison to inmates whose risk characteristics are exactly similar. So you're making an apples-to-apples comparison. So you're seeing some slow but promising impact on the overall population, but when you compare inmates who are just like others who haven't been through it, you're really seeing the appreciable difference. Our early research indicates that as the risk levels of the individuals go up, so does the impact of the program. And so we expect to continue to build on this over time.
Can I ask you this question? I'm just fascinated by the fact that corrections has always been a very male-dominated field. And we've taken in recent years, had a very hard line law and order approach. And now you have a woman governor of your state who recruited you to come, and you're standing here with with Captain Duran. And are women? Do you think the gender has had a role in bringing a different philosophy to corrections, and how promising do you think that might be beyond the state of Arizona? You've worked in other communities.
Mm-hmm. I think that this speaks to something good in everybody. It is admittedly a different approach, but just as policing continue to appreciate that they can't arrest themselves out of problems, we can't either control our yards or prepare people for the street by always being in a face down with them. And so it was really time to change the equation. One of the remarkable things about our innovation is the way, maybe a little bit of the feminine energy, but we invited the most unlikely groups, our officers and other staff, and the inmates, crime victims, and other stakeholders in the community to come together lots of times, all the time. And so it's a very collaborative process. I mean, there's no mistaking who's in charge, but this is a shared endeavor. And because it comes from everybody, it really has a strength that bully clubs and rubber bullets just won't get you.
Thank you. Bill Klinger, last question.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I'm really impressed with the fact that you've made a systemic shift here from, say, basically incarceration to rehabilitation, and that all prisoners are going to be involved in the program over the period of time that you're in the second year of rollout at this point?
Well, we're actually starting our fifth year. We've had groups who have gone through the entire thing for as much as 2 years.
But as it is a rehabilitation program, and lifers, life sentence people, and people who are long-term people are presumably involved. How are they involved? Is it different?
Yeah. We expect and invite everyone to participate in this initiative. In our state, which is true in most other states, virtually everybody does go home. 96% of our population serve a term of years. Only 4% do either life or death. Inviting lifers is as important because they're a stabilizing influence. They're as invested in safety now as we are in safety now, as well as later. One of the things that's really special, though, is that this is a dynamic where responsibilities are shifted from staff to the population. The folks who got themselves there and have to get themselves out and stay out are really empowered, as are our correctional officers, to make change and to make meaningful change happen.
Our time is up, but Nancy Johnson had one final question.
I just wanted to inquire as to how you're going to keep this going. Sometimes a new program like this that's very kind of human and depends on good relationships and dialogue and things like that dies out. And I know you get together once a year, but to do strategic planning. But are new ideas coming out of that, or is it rehash? Yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
At my complex at Lewis, we have forums where we work with the staff and the inmates. We all sit down together monthly and discuss any problems that are arising on the units and how we can come together and fix them.
And likewise, at the state level, we have actually 14 meetings a year because we do this at every prison, plus with stakeholders coming to each prison, plus 3 others that are led department-wide. That spins off into all sorts of work groups, and then the work groups become subject matter experts like Christina, who come back and report more. So there are formal convocations, but there are many, many more informal convocations that occur continuously.
Well, I'm sure we can certainly understand why your peers voted you the top corrections officer in the United States. And Captain Duran, thank you both very much for coming.
Thank you.
All right, we move on now to the teacher residency program from the Boston Public School District here in Massachusetts with Jesse Solomon and William Horwath. Jesse Solomon is the director of the teacher residency program, and Bill Horwath is assistant superintendent for human resources.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is the teacher in me, you're supposed to respond, good afternoon. That's how we get started, and just kind of, you're not going to get by just sitting there looking down the whole time. The Boston Teacher Residency is the Boston Public Schools' own teacher preparation program. Our mission is to recruit, prepare, and sustain excellent teachers in and for the Boston Public Schools. The work of the Boston Teacher Residency, or BTR, begins with the assumption that the nation's greatest civil rights issue is the fact that there are two distinct public school systems, separate and unequal. One system that prepares most of its young people for the demands of the 21st century, for the global economy, and one that fails most of its young people. As you already know, disproportionate numbers of students of color, students from families with limited incomes, and recent immigrants are relegated to the second and inferior school system. The Boston Teacher Residency, or BTR, is based on one very simple idea, that the most powerful lever we have in education reform is the teacher. Put more simply, as any parent knows, I just want my kid to have a good teacher. 5 years ago, unable to get the full supply of teachers it needed from local colleges of education, Boston made the decision to go into the teacher preparation business. BTR focuses on three critical parts of the teacher pipeline: recruitment and selection, preparation, and ongoing support or induction. BTR puts extensive resources into recruiting a diverse cohort of outstanding and committed people who want to teach in Boston. We look for people with outstanding content backgrounds, but also people with a set of personal characteristics which will make them incredibly persistent and single-minded in the pursuit of high academic gains for all of their children. We are a selective program. Approximately 1 in 6 applicants gets into the program. BTR prepares our participants, called teacher residents, through an intense 13-month program based on the medical residency model. We believe that the best way to learn to teach is at the elbow of a trained, supported mentor who engages with the resident in reflective practice. We place cohorts of residents in host schools akin to teaching hospitals for a full year. Our residents work closely with mentors, taking on more and more responsibility as the year goes on, but always working under the supervision of master practitioners. BTR designs all of our own coursework, which allows us to tailor our courses to the work of Boston, its curriculum, its history, its communities, and its aspirations. Through a partnership with UMass Boston, residents also receive a master's degree. Residents receive a stipend and health insurance during their year of preparation. BTR charges residents a tuition, but we loan them the full tuition on the day they get into the program, and then forgive a third for each year that they teach in Boston. Hence, when we recruit them, we say this is not money that we ever want to see back from them. At the end of their preparation year, residents take full teaching positions in the Boston Public Schools, and BTR provides comprehensive support to them for at least 3 more years, which are traditionally the most difficult years in teaching. In this way, we're building an ever larger group of graduates who are part of a larger movement in the city for educational equity. As I was preparing these remarks, I tried to avoid cliches, so I hope you'll forgive one cliche just because I cite the reference. Ecclesiastes 1:9 reads, "What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." So while we believe that we're the first big city in the country to do this, and just one of a few residency programs nationwide, I'm not going to claim that all the components of BTR are brand new. Rather, we've tried to take a lot of what is known about good teacher preparation and put it together. There is no silver bullet in education. We have not tried to come up with the one piece that will make great teachers. Instead, we've tried to combine a number of approaches: recruitment, preparation, induction, structures, which together have the potential to produce outstanding teachers. An important key to our innovation is that it's district-based. The bottom line lies with the school system, not an outside provider. In the old structure, the urban school district was at the whim of the providers, taking what they gave. If the school system was lucky, the supply was good. If not, then oh well. BTR radically upturns that relationship, making the school district the producer rather than the consumer. For a school district to take the preparation of teachers into its own hands is a fundamental change in how we think about the supply of human capital. Although our work is still in its early stages, we have strong initial results. Did I say 1 minute? Oh, shoot. Sorry. Okay, here are strong initial results, really quickly. So to date, we were tasked with recruiting and preparing teachers in high-needs areas for Boston: math and science teachers, special education teachers, teachers of color. To date, over half of our teachers have been people of color, and over half at the middle and high school level have been in math and science. All residents get dual license in special education. Over 90% of our graduates have been retained in teaching positions in the district. Principals rate our grads favorably to their counterparts, and we're working on a value-added student achievement study with Professor Tom Kane here at Harvard. BTR has recently co-founded a national organization with 2 similar programs, one in Chicago and one right outside of Denver, to bring this work across the country. Over the past 2 years, we've received a number of inquiries from other cities that want to do this work. Starting this July, we'll have programs new programs that want to start in New York, Philadelphia, the Denver Public Schools, and Chattanooga that will come spend a year with us learning how to build a residency model in their city. There's language in the Higher Ed Act, which we expect to pass hopefully soon, that will support residencies nationwide.
Thank you, Jesse.
I took up all your time.
I'm afraid you did. But use the Q&A creatively.
Right.
All right, David.
I love what you're doing, and my guess is this is the way all teachers ought to be trained. But I have one big question. In your district, 53% of new teachers leave within 3 years. So the challenge is retention of these new teachers. You require them to stay 3 years. The data we've been given says that in the first class of only 12, 5 left after 3 years, and in the second class, 13% left after 2 years. Do you have more recent data, and how can you assure us that your success is not the effectiveness is not going to be undermined by these people getting frustrated and going elsewhere?
The simple answer is I can't assure you, because this is the work. I think what we've done is our initial goal was to say, can we prepare folks who stay 3 years? And to date, we've sort of said about 90% of the case we can do that. The question now, I think, which has been raised for our program and for the district-wide, is really how do you then work with second stage teachers, these teachers who've had 3 years under their belt, they get good, and now they're looking for leadership opportunities. And our answer to that really is to go much more deeply into schools, because the cultures and work conditions in individual schools are often what makes the decision for teachers between staying and leaving. And so our work has really become and is becoming much more school-based.
I'll just add that retention is a very key issue that you point to. But one thing that BTR does very well is train its teachers to be good at the beginning too, so that we have very high quality first and second and third year teachers. So while they are in the Boston Public School system, they're stronger than many of their counterparts coming from other programs.
Do you have data on student achievement that proves that?
We're working on it.
We don't have data on student. What we have is we've given Tom Kahn, as I mentioned, an economist at Harvard, the student database and the teacher character database to actually produce a student achievement result. Right now, that's not something that's being done statewide, so we had to build a system.
Yeah, Ron?
Just one quick follow-up to David's question about retention. Do the numbers that we were given reflect retention across the district, or can you contrast that with those teachers that are hired outside of the teacher residency? I mean, is this an improvement? I mean, but is the retention among those teachers that come through the residency program better than the general population at least, or is it about the same?
Yeah, so the general population has been retained at about 50% over 3 years, and our teachers have been retained at a rate of about 90%.
And same for first year and second year?
That's over 3 years. That's through 3 years.
One of the big issues has been the quality of people who are entering a teaching force. Can you give us some indication or some data about the qualitative difference of people entering this program who are attracted into this versus the other teachers you're hiring?
Well, I'll talk about it from the front end, and then. So one of the first indicators is that we accept about 1 in 6 applicants. It's about a 17% acceptance rate. Many of the education programs have acceptance rates 50, 60, 70, 80%. So
of your standard.
I'm sorry?
Of your other teaching programs.
Yeah, when you look at other colleges of education, they have acceptance rates that are generally well over 50%. So part of it is being selective on the front end. So we try to get a huge pipeline and then narrow it down. We also, not everybody passes our program, so we try to be selective throughout, and then we feed them into the district.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think that, again, the Tom Kahn research is going to be very telling for us. But also just the fact that these teachers are teaching and learning in Boston, and so quality by Boston standards is being gauged very closely, and they're learning from the Boston curriculum, and that adds, I think, a lot to the program. Whereas,
but my real question is, Teach for America would argue that it's attracting a qualitatively different kind of person to come in. And I'm trying to figure out, is this program able to do that?
I think we are, but I think we say that it's not just one thing. It's not just about who we attract. It's who we attract. It's how we select them. It's how we prepare them. It's how we support them. So it puts those things together.
If you do this program, do you get paid more on the other end?
Not yet, although we're working on that.
We're working on it.
I know there was some initial resistance from the teaching colleges to this approach, and you said that you're now seeing this replicated in Denver and I believe one other city.
And programs in New York and Philly and Chattanooga are starting next year.
What has been the reaction in those states to this model from the teaching colleges?
I think it's been much more positive. I think we had to break down some walls, but I think now the organizations that we're seeing coming through are coming through with partnerships intact from the beginning.
All right. Do you want to go?
Just to follow up on that, is it partnerships with the teaching colleges or the coming out of the school district? Where's the desire to replicate this program?
The impetus is coming from the school district and often a partner local nonprofit, but they're coming in with partnerships with the university already, but it's based in the school district.
I just a brief question. What is the advantage of knowing how Boston teaches versus how Chicago teaches?
So before we started this program, we started it with Superintendent Payzant, who at that point had been in Boston for 8 years. Before Payzant, there had been 10 superintendents in the 18 years. So basically, to be a great teacher or a great principal, you just ignored whatever was coming from downtown because you knew it was going to change in 2 years. So we were in the middle of 8 years of coherent instructional reform. So the idea is you train people in that reform agenda so when they start on day one, they know how to implement that agenda rather than taking another year to learn what's the work that Boston is doing.
So it just matters that it's Boston. So that notion wouldn't matter in a city that has had 16 superintendents in 15 years.
Right, but so other cities that are doing this, so Chicago, for example, Arnie Duncan, same kind of thing. You have consistent educational reform. You can train into that reform.
Okay. We could obviously talk about this for a lot longer. It's a fascinating subject. But Jesse Solomon and Bill Horowitz, thank you very much for coming. We move now to the state of Missouri, the Division of Youth Services with Tim Decker, who is director of the Division of Youth Services, and Terrence Barkley, who is a student there at the Youth Center. We have the second appearance by a 17-year-old. Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Terrence. I'm 17. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. Right now I'm still in DUI's custody. I got locked up in 2007 for stealing cars. But my life was pretty much all crime back then. I was involved with gangs. I used and sold drugs, and I stopped going to school, and I wasn't involved with my family like I should be. So when I got locked up, it wasn't a big surprise to me because I knew it was going to be caught sooner or later. After being in detention for a while, they told me I was going to be going to state, that I was going to be going to DUI's custody, and I really didn't know what that was. I thought I was going to jail. I thought they were sending me to prison. And when I got there, what I expected. They told me that this was not like prison, that they didn't expect me to just do my time or wait my time out, but they expected me to do treatment to help me with my problems and that I can get help here. And I really didn't understand that when I first got there, and I didn't want to do it because I didn't know what treatment was. I didn't want to be there in the first place, and I didn't want to deal with my problems, so it took me a while. Kind of watching the group and watching them do what they do, I kind of learned and picked up on that it is better to be there working on my problems with people that can help me than to be in real jail sitting alone and letting my problems get worse. So that helped me kind of turn around and help me see that my life was going down the wrong path. So I got better at talking about my problems with the group, and I think the group's probably the best thing to help me because I know they've been through some of the same stuff I've been through. So it's easy to talk to them about what I went through. And they made me feel real supported when I was there, so that was another way to help me start talking about my problems. And they encouraged me to get my family involved so that I could feel supported when I go back on the outside. And so my mom was real involved in my process too, and she liked what I'm doing now better than what I was doing before I got locked up. And since I've been at DUI's custody, I graduated high school. I'm a freshman in college, and I plan on doing something like this when I get out. And I directed Tim Decker to take it from here.
You know, Terrence could not have stood before you and said what he said today prior to our innovation. His mother wouldn't have even been invited to be here and certainly wouldn't be engaged in his treatment process.
Where's the proud mom? Where is she?
Yes.
Please
right
stand
there.
up.
Right there.
We're glad to have you here.
You know, we were historically in Missouri looking through the binoculars from the wrong direction with a very limited view of what was possible for our young people, and too often focused on single program strategies as a way to turn things around. In his book, Social Intelligence, Daniel Goleman, a renowned and best-selling author and psychologist, describes Missouri young people in the Division of Youth Services as the few lucky ones. And while that makes us feel honored, it makes us very sad about the condition of juvenile justice in our country. We are drawing hope from the Missouri story, which really began with us fundamentally seeing young people differently, seeing them as a product of their past experiences, as a work in progress, as a potential resource to others, instead of seeing them as criminals and inmates and trainees. We swim upstream every day because we forego training schools and correctional programs and boot camps in favor of treatment provided through small family-like treatment centers, 32 located around the state, where control is maintained through staff facilitation and group cooperation. A continuum of care that begins with working with the courts on diversion and provides a single service coordinator for every young person to be their advocate throughout their entire stay. Family therapy and treatment of parents as experts, and community liaison council members and our advisory board as partners, and a rigorous 24/7 treatment process that focuses on core issues and internalized change using the best of group treatment and family systems approaches. I'd ask the panelists to consider for a minute what it would be like for you to deal with one of your most painful life experiences and to do that with 10 other people. Our young people do that every day in DYS, every day, in a system that was previously correctional, oppressive, and unsafe. We come before you today because we've progressed from just doing the right thing to a consistent track record of results. Over 3,300 young people are diverted every year by working with the courts. Of those that come to us, 70% remain law-abiding and 92% avoid further incarceration for 3 years after discharge. 84% are involved productively in their communities through school or work. And even though we have them just a short period of time, 70% progress at a faster rate than their same-age peers in core subjects, 90% earn high school credits, 24% get their diplomas, and 48% return to public schools. We will achieve these outcomes for years to come because this is not a single program strategy, even though there's strategies in this that are worthy of your recognition. This is a total system change coming from the inside out that combines leadership, culture, and effective strategy for a model of effective government. 25 states have visited Missouri already seeking solutions to their most complex problems in juvenile justice. There currently is a practice workbook in development that will help articulate the process to others interested in implementing it. And there's currently 2 documentary projects underway. One will be a full-length movie for network TV about our young people's stories, and another will be a more directed, made-for-news kind of documentary that will begin to make the case for national transformation. We ask you to join us and help us find that tipping point because this is difficult change that has to occur in these systems, and for leaders to have the courage and conviction to implement it, and for us to support them in that process, we need your support. Thank you. We'll take questions now.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, please, Kathleen.
Well, I love your statistics. I'm actually very curious about how are you helping other states? Do you have a designated person, or is there a foundation who's already given you money to help you with replication?
The KC Foundation has provided some money to set up the Missouri Youth Services Institute, which provides assistance to a number of states that are involved in implementing this approach. The District of Columbia, Louisiana, New Mexico, and others. We also are regularly fielding that with our staff. One of our challenges is balancing the internal and external because we get calls every day, and we've actually had visits from 8 states just this year who are amazed at what if you ever doubt if this is innovative or not, they're amazed at what they're seeing, and some of them can't imagine implementing it in their systems, so they're going to need a lot of support to do it.
Thank you.
Yes, David, and then Bill Klinger.
I think Bill was first.
Bill, go ahead.
You've located, I think, 32 of these residential around the country, around the state.
Correct.
Are they generally accepted in the areas in which they've been placed? Has there been any NIMBY, any pushback in terms of community acceptance of the residential homes?
Interesting, we used to have that issue years ago, but now they're through these community liaison councils that are at all of our sites. The community is regularly engaged. We have community members that come in and attend Sunday visits with young people who don't have their families coming. We have scholarship funds that are supporting college for our kids that come from the community. In most cases, our communities are extremely engaged, and they see themselves as part of the treatment process as well.
Good. David?
Your statistics that you gave us are incredibly impressive, but to put them in context, can you compare them to what the statistics were 25 years ago before you began this approach?
Unfortunately, we weren't very good at collecting data back then. What I can tell you is if you want to compare to other states that count recidivism, for instance, in a similar way, we're typically in between 7 and 9%. And Dick Mandel's report that he completed in 2003 found that other states that counted in a similar way were 29 to 45% in terms of reincarceration and recidivism. So the results are astounding, quite frankly, in comparison. And that's our best we can do because of data.
Thank you. Yes, please, Maria.
I'm just trying to, in thinking about other states trying to replicate, what's the total number, is Missouri a small enough state, if you will, in which this kind of residential treatment, I mean, other than St. Louis, there's not another major urban area, right? I mean, like that.
Don't forget Kansas City now.
Pardon?
That's where I'm from, Kansas City. Don't forget Kansas City now.
Yeah, I always forget. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Kansas City's not in Kansas, by the way. Go ahead. So you're asking about...
Yeah, is it sort of, it's doable because there's this combination of rural and two big cities.
Quite frankly, I don't think that's a factor at all. That's one of the, when people come and they view the system, the first thing that they do is they doubt the results. They think somehow the kids are different. It usually takes about a day before somebody in a site visit asks the very brave question of where do you keep the bad kids? And that's hard for us to answer because we don't think any of them are bad, but we say, oh, the serious offenders, they're right here where you are. 51% of our young people come to us for felony offenses. So the comparison between states is not much different in terms of the kids you're serving. We have two major areas. We have rural areas. It's actually a pretty good model for any state.
Yes, please, Nancy.
Missouri has a long history of leadership in children's services particularly. And how much of your success is evolutionary from past programs that you've adopted, and how much is the result of a new innovation? And what, in your estimation, is the difference between innovation and continuous improvement?
I think the very best innovations have an aspect of continuous improvement in them. We thought about this as we were considering applying for this award, and what we decided was that an innovation is not really determined by when it was thought of or when its implementation started, that it really has to do with how it compares with predominant practice in the country. And predominant practice in juvenile justice is correctional in nature, and it got worse in the 90s. It got much worse in the 90s with youth prisons being built around the country. Conditions in youth facilities now are worse than they are in many adult facilities, and we tolerate that. That needs to change. The other thing I would say that addresses your question of evolution is that one thing that should be studied and replicated about this effort is that the combination of leadership, culture change, and an effective strategy have allowed us to sustain this and continue, quite frankly, to innovate. I assure you there were innovations that occurred with a young person yesterday in our programs because the focus is on making the program fit the young person and not the young person fitting the program. It should be studied how this has been sustained in juvenile justice, just like child welfare, where the pendulum always swings back and forth between extremes. It doesn't swing in Missouri anymore, and that in itself is an innovation.
Terrence, your future? What do you envision yourself doing?
I plan on finishing college, and I'm working on my 4-year degree in college, and I'm planning on doing something like this when I get out, work for a facility like this one with criminal justice.
I've already talked to his mom about him working for us.
Aha. Well, we thank you both for coming here today. Thank you very, very much. And I wanted to say there, we had one other 17-year-old, and the proud mom of James Blackwell is here too. I wanted you to stand up. He was here from North Carolina earlier. Okay, now we move to the city of New York. I think we have a couple of different appearances from New York today, but this is the acquisition fund from the city with Sean Donovan, who's the commissioner of the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and Rafael Cistero. Is that right? Correct?
Did very well, yes.
Well,
exactly.
it was lucky. Senior Vice President and Chief Program Officer of Enterprise Community Partners. Gentlemen.
On October 5th, 1977, President Jimmy Carter surveyed the devastation on Charlotte Street in the South Bronx, comparing it to Dresden after World War II. 1 week later, Howard Cosell asked the TV camera to pan across the fires raging beyond the outfield of Yankee Stadium and famously declared to millions of World Series viewers, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Bronx is burning." These events exposed the nation to the crumbling of New York City's neighborhoods. Parts of the South Bronx lost 3/4 of their residents during the 1970s, and the city lost about 800,000 people, more than the entire population of Boston or Washington, D.C. In a desperate and courageous move, Mayor Koch approved a plan to begin taking over tax-delinquent properties, and by 1980, my agency, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, or HPD, had become the landlord of last resort for more than 100,000 apartments and thousands of vacant lots. This tax foreclosed property became the foundation of the city's affordable housing efforts for the next quarter century. Working in partnership with local nonprofit organizations and small private developers, HPD used these properties as a powerful tool for creating and preserving affordable housing and for rebuilding neighborhoods. Today, with crime at record lows and schools improving, the South Bronx and other neighborhoods have been transformed. Fewer than 1,000 units of housing remain in HPD ownership, and in 2006, Mayor Bloomberg announced the sale of our last vacant lots. Yet this transformation has brought New York City and its housing partners a fundamentally new challenge. Where will the land and buildings come from for our future affordable housing efforts?
And what will become of these housing partners that sprung up in response to the crisis and worked alongside government to rebuild New York's neighborhoods? My organization, Enterprise, was founded by Jim Rouse in 1982 to nurture and grow these pioneers in the community development movement. After reaching a scale of success few imagined, these partners' very success has created a new challenge. After relying on HPD as a ready source of buildings and land for the past quarter century, our partners must now compete against well-capitalized, nimble market-rate housing developers to find property for affordable housing. In short, they must become entrepreneurs in a new housing marketplace.
So what is our innovation? To address this new housing marketplace, we developed the New York City Acquisition Fund, a new community development finance tool that provides early-stage capital for the acquisition of privately owned land and buildings. It is the deep pockets our partners need to respond quickly to opportunities to buy privately owned property as it comes on the market. There are three key elements of the fund's design that are innovative. All three flow from a fundamental approach that sought out nonprofit, philanthropic, and for-profit partners to share skills and share risk in a new way. Innovation in government sometimes means understanding what government can't do or can't do alone. First, a small public commitment of $8 million from New York City leveraged enormous private investment into a $230 million fund. More importantly, the city and foundation funding are one-time investments. The fund was designed to be self-sustaining. Second, emulating sophisticated structured finance techniques, the city's money takes the riskiest position in the fund, followed by the foundations and then the banks. This careful sharing of risk allows banks to be comfortable advancing money in higher amounts and on better terms than any pure private market transaction, and the funding is available much faster than any government or foundation process could provide. Third, the fund generates its pipeline of projects through 5 nonprofit lenders like Enterprise. In fact, to a developer, the fund should be invisible because it operates as a secondary market or wholesale buyer of loans. This allows the 5 lenders to use the financial resources of the fund to greatly expand the scale and impact of their lending. And because these lenders have their ears to the ground in neighborhoods across the city, the fund has much broader reach than if government made the loans directly. As for results, there are 3 key measures of our success. First, scale. The fund has financed properties that will house nearly 1,600 families, and the pace is accelerating. Another 600 units of housing will be funded shortly. Second, speed. The fund has an average turnaround of 2 weeks and even funded 1 loan in 5 days. And third, profitability. This year we project a profit of more than $630,000. At this pace, the fund can become self-sustaining in 5 to 7 years.
One of the most important successes of the fund has been replication for other places and other challenges. Each of the partners in the New York City Acquisition Fund is seeking to replicate the model across the country. To date, Enterprise has closed similar funds in Los Angeles, Atlanta, Louisiana, Washington, D.C., and we are working with San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, and Denver to create a similar model. We are exploring the use of the model to purchase property in neighborhoods destabilized by the foreclosure crisis, provide energy efficiency loans to owners of multifamily housing, and clean up brownfields for redevelopment. This replication could allow the New York City Acquisition Fund to change the way community development capital is provided across the country.
Good. Thank you. Questions?
Does it work work in cities just like New York that has a lack of land, or is it good everywhere? Where, you know, at one point, like in Baltimore, we have a lot of more land. You know, we have a challenge of development, of attracting developers.
Yeah, in fact, we are looking to replicate this model in places like Baltimore and Cleveland and more weak market cities that have really been affected by the recent foreclosure crisis, as a way to aggregate capital to acquire property and bank the land for when the market returns. So we think it is replicable to markets like that.
The other thing I would just point out on that, when we were designing the fund and created it, New York was in its strongest market that it really had been in decades.
Right.
Today, that's changing. And in fact, what we see now is new opportunities that we hadn't envisioned, where more property is becoming available and there's less competition in some ways for that property. And so we see new opportunities as a result of the market weakening.
David?
Your program's fairly new, and I'm trying to get a handle on how you're doing on your goal of 30,000 units in 10 years. So I'm trying to get a sense of the pace. How many closings have you had, or are you producing now, say, in a 6-month period?
So the original goal was over 10 years to get to 30,000 units of housing, which would help roughly 75,000 people find affordable housing. With the originations over the past year, we are on pace to achieve that. So in other words, 3,000 units a year. In fact, we've closed 1,600. We had a relatively slow startup in the first year with new transactions and advertising the fund and everything. But as I mentioned, we have 600 units that will close within the next 30 to 60 days, and we are on pace at that 3,000 unit a year level over the past year.
True. Bill Klinger, did you have a question here?
Yeah, I guess some concern had been expressed about by some of the foundations that are partners in this operation, that they would be involving themselves in making loans in mixed market housing developments that would be, people would take exception to them because they were being subsidized when they were being unfairly competed with and so forth for the project. Is that a problem?
Well, in fact, I think that's one of the interesting things. We have so many partners here that one of the most difficult things we had in creating the fund was meeting all the various needs. We have foundations that want to focus on home ownership. We have foundations like the MacArthur Foundation that want to focus on preservation. And there were lots of discussions and some tension, frankly, around whose interests were we serving and wanting to keep the fund flexible. On that particular issue, what we saw, I think, is more important than that. We've fundamentally changed the way that we provide affordable housing in this country and in New York, where mixed income housing has become the model, unlike public housing, which was 100% low income. The problem was that the foundations both had a legal requirement to serve low income people and also had a focus wanting to make sure their money was going toward only low income people, not to market rate units or moderate income people. So what we did is create a benchmark for the fund, which was that at least 75% of the units had to be low income. We're meeting those benchmarks easily today. We're at over 90% low income. We do have more mixed income coming into the fund, but I'm confident we can meet those goals. I also think what we're starting to see is some of the foundations changing the way they view affordable housing and also trying to change the legal structure that stops them from doing mixed income housing.
I'm curious, as a matter of the innovation, who pulled this together? How did this happen?
It was a series of conversations. I was talking a little bit to Carl Weisbrod earlier. Herb Sturz, who many of you may know in New York at the Open Society Institute, Raphael and I went to dinner with him and were discussing a fund that they had set up in South Africa. There were also discussions that Raphael and Enterprise had with the Star Foundation about this, and it was one of those where probably 2 or 3 different people had the same idea at the same time and came together to experiment with it.
But under the direction of the mayor, or was it done in the private sector and the mayor signed on?
It was done under the leadership of myself, under the mayor's guidance, with Enterprise as the leader.
You were already working for the mayor at that time. You were working.
I was, and in fact, Raphael was working for me at that time, and it's since gone over to Enterprise and is leading the fund.
Huh, fascinating. Any other questions? Well, that's extremely interesting. So we thank you, Mr. Donovan, and we congratulate you as a graduate of the school. And Mr. Cicero, thank you. course. Almost as much. All right, now we go to the state of California, to the Welcome Back Center program with Zoe Cardoza-Clayson and Nabil Al-Sufi. I hope I've done justice to both of you. All right, good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to highlight several of the key aspects of the Welcome Back model. I know that you've read all of the materials and had the information from the site visit, but we wanted to particularly highlight 3 things today that we would like for you to focus on. First is that the Welcome Back model is significant to society. Second, there is strong evidence demonstrating its success. And third, it has profoundly affected the lives of over 7,000 individuals and has the potential of affecting the lives of thousands more. First, regarding the significance, our society is becoming more culturally and linguistically diverse. And in order to ensure that this population has access to health services, we need a health workforce mirroring that population. The Welcome Back model does that. Number 2, we have strong evidence demonstrating the effectiveness of this model. Our web-based data collection system houses quantitative data for all participants for the last 7 years. It's been very exciting for me, being a person involved in evaluation for more than 20 years, to really see a commitment of a program from its very inception to collecting evidence that will help us understand the successes, the necessity for making mid-course corrections, and to provide the evidence necessary for replicability. This data has been used for all of these purposes, including having the director of the program use this kind of information in order to gain more support in a variety of venues. We have extensive qualitative data as well, describing the relationships between our public and private partners. The educational institutions, that is, the community colleges, the state universities, the medical schools, what did those relationships look like, and being able to document that over time. The employers, who were they? What did they really want the Welcome Back program to do, and how could they participate? And with policymakers that were key to eliminating those barriers to Welcome Back participants being fully integrated into the health workforce. All of this information is housed in a web umbrella differentially accessible to external and external audiences. Finally, the third item, which is Welcome Back has profoundly impacted the lives of 7,000 people and has the potential to impact thousands more. And in this regard, I wanted you to hear from Welcome Back participant Dr. Al-Sufi regarding his experiences.
Thank you, Zoe. It's an honor to be here. I just want to talk a little bit about my personal story and how it was affected by Welcome Back Center. I graduated as an MD in Sofia, Bulgaria in 1997 and went back to my home country, Yemen, where I worked for 2 years as a general practitioner. In 2000, I came to the United States. I knew very little English, and I knew almost nothing about the healthcare system here. I had to work as a security guard and as a parking attendant while I was trying to prepare for the licensing process. This proved to be very frustrating. As time went by, I found myself more distant than from the medical practice. Just about when I was losing hope, I learned about the Welcome Back Center. Not only they helped me get the Master's in Public Health, but they provided me with the hope that even if I don't work as a doctor in this country, I can use my background in many other ways and contribute to my new community. So for 4 years now, I am working as a public health professional. I led a team that designed innovative intervention that addresses that prevent childhood lead poisoning in Marin County, California. It was described by the EPA as groundbreaking and is being considered best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Carl.
Doctor, how much time do you think the Welcome Back program saved you in terms of how much longer would it have taken you, do you think, if ever, to get licensed here, back on track, and doing the kind of work you're doing if it hadn't been for the Welcome Back program?
Thank you. As I said, I was almost losing hope, so I wouldn't be able to say how much time, but I think much longer. And the longer I worked in those jobs, the more distant I felt that I would never be. I felt more that I will never be able to go back to the healthcare system.
And to Ms. Clayson, in your research and your evaluation, the target population in terms of how long immigrants have been in the United States, and what's the what do you find as the average length of time that people have been here before they engage with Welcome Back?
We did a sub-study of our data and determined that the, quote, successful profile for our participants were those that had been in the United States for less than 3 years. We have participants who have been here anywhere from 6 months to 20 years, but our most successful participants were those that had a certain level of English language proficiency, had been in the country for 3 years or less, and were women. Across all professions, women 3 to 1 were more able to achieve their self-defined outcomes.
And do you have a sense from the work that you've done how much time you save a typical participant in the Welcome Back program to get back into the healthcare field?
For the nurses, I would say that we have a better understanding because of the concordance with the needs of the health workforce. Nurses are in high demand. So if the nurse has her diplomas and materials from her country of origin, we can pretty much fast track that person, getting her or him to pass the NCLEX in 6 months to a year. But they have to have a certain kind of starting point. It's a much longer process for physicians, going through residency programs and all the other licensing requirements. So we often work with them individually to go on other pathways on related fields that are in the healthcare system but aren't actually licensed physicians.
Let's see, Tony Williams, and then we'll come over to Bill Klinger.
Yeah, I see that, Doctor, you're working in public health in the area of childhood lead poisoning up in Marin County. So, on one hand, Marin County doesn't really sound like an underserved area, but certainly childhood lead poisoning and public health is serving, people who need that help. So could either of you talk to me about what you're doing to allow someone like the doctor to practice once again, how that's helping underserved communities, which I noticed was part of your mission and your material?
Well, one of our original visions of this model was to provide practitioners to the safety net, that we were very philosophically committed to the safety net. But the reality is that the private sectors take with nurses. They can afford to pay much higher wages than can a lot of community clinics. So they're in competition for our graduates because, for example, in California, the Kaiser system has a big campaign to have a more diverse health workforce. And so they're competing with our community clinics. But our previous director is the director of the Mission Neighborhood Health Center. She and her colleagues really go out of their way to hire Welcome Back participants, and they know that we have that philosophical commitment to the safety net.
Thank you.
See, Bill Klinger, you had a question?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, so I understand that there's not a requirement for individuals who are assisted by the program to actually serve in underserved areas. Is that correct?
No, there isn't. Originally, we wanted to have that as a requirement for the participants, but then we decided that that wasn't really realistic with all of the other demands on people's lives. But our evidence has demonstrated that those people that have participated in our program, like with Nabil, yes, Marin County is a high-income county, but the people and families that he serves are in the Canal and in Marin City, which are two areas of low-income populations. So we're seeing that the commitment that our graduates have is also to the underserved in our communities.
Thank you. This time is up, but there are 3 questions still outstanding. Maria, Nancy, and I want one. We'll all be brief.
Very quickly. This is innovations in government. Your partners in Los Angeles and San Diego are private universities, are they not?
No, they aren't. They're community colleges.
Oh, really?
And they're public community colleges in the community college system.
Okay.
Do you make any effort to get people who were trained to be physicians in other countries to go into the physician assistants kind of programs here in America? Our participants are only people that are here already. We don't have any sort of recruitment from other countries. They're people that are here already. And for those physicians, we are working with 2 programs, one in New York and one at Stanford, and the physician assistant program to try to fast-track some of our participants into those programs.
I wanted to follow up Maria's question very briefly. All of the institutions participating in this sound like they're public institutions, but they're not governmental institutions. They're all universities. Is that correct?
They are public institutions. The community colleges are all public colleges. San Francisco State University is State University, and UC.
But I wanted to ask you about government per se. Government has simply has given you, has said yes, in effect. Go ahead and do this.
Yes. Correct. They've said yes, and that our intersection is more with the licensing boards and those kind of policymakers.
Good. All right. Well, thank you both very, very much for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that completes. Actually, we're now 2/3 of the way through. We are due for another short break. It's 4 o'clock. And there has been a desire to finish by 5. We have 5 left. And so if we could be back in roughly 10 minutes, we can come in very close to the appointed hour. Thank you all.